In your notes, you should have an eye that looks about like this. Oh my gosh, that's awful. Yeah, hopefully it looks better than that one. Somewhat round. It was an anterior view, so you got, your pupil, your iris, things like that. You had all that stuff here. But I had you do the musculature of the eye around the outside: superior rectus, lateral rectus, medial rectus, inferior rectus, superior oblique, inferior oblique, things like that. We're going to be working off of that picture. So if you have something that looks roughly like this, then we'll have a good place to start. A lot of people think, so I'm going to write down here where we should have a little bit of room, tears, okay? A lot of people think that tears are produced by tear ducts, and they are not produced by tear ducts. Just like the air in your air ducts in your house is not, generated by the ducts. The ducts, their only job is to carry that to where it's going. So I think I had you draw a right eye. So this is going to be the lateral side of the right eye. I want you to put kind of a weird heap on the corner of this eye up here, and we're going to just kind of fill it in. This is going to be a terrible description of this, but this is a tear gland, okay? And the terrible description of how it appears is it looks glandular, which is dumb. If you don't know what a gland is, it's not helpful, okay? It's not actually just tear gland, it's called a lacrimal gland. As we learned, lacrima means tears. Like the Mozart Requiem I played for you last semester when we studied the lacrimal bone. Lacrima means tears. So your lacrimal gland is up here on the lateral superior portion of the eye, and it just kind of rests on there. That is going to be cranking out those tears. And like I said, glandular is a terrible description of a gland, especially if you've never seen one before. But here's one that may be more useful. Glands typically look like cottage cheese. And I know that's disgusting, but that it's true. They're like clumps of cells all packed really tightly together. Like salivary glands look like this. The pancreas looks like this. Like most glands in the body look like clumps of cells all packed together like cottage cheese. When we do our dissection, you'll see a number of different glands, and you'll know what I'm talking about. But this one, notwithstanding, it looks the same. Now there are little, like, it kind of looks like a little rain cloud, actually. There are these little ducts, these little tubes that extend from it over the surface of the eye. Those are the tear ducts. And again, their job is just to move the tears over the surface of the eye. So these are lacrimal ducts. Okay. Now, we produce a fair amount of tears in a day. I don't remember what the quantity is, but it's a lot. And tears have a lot of function. Like, their purpose is pretty important. And each of these is going to be draining over the surface of the eye like this. They're going to be pushing those tears out to keep your eye lubricated. But as you blink, all of the tears all get directed over here. They cover the surface of the eye, but when it's all said and done, they all head to the middle part right here. Now, I'm going to erase just a little bit of this to try to fade it to the background. In the medial portion of your eye, where your eyelid comes together and meets, there's this pink dot right here. Okay? It's where your eye boogers collect as you sleep at night. This dot right here is called the medial canthus. The medial canthus is where your tears get collected, not so much by the dot, but there are two pretty decent sized tubes attached to this dot here. And there's one on the top, there's one on the bottom, but they both dump into this thing right here, which drains to the nasal passage. Drains to the nasal passage. This place that drains to the nasal passage is called the nasolacrimal duct. And it's called naso because it goes to the nose, lacrimal because it goes through the lacrimal bone, and duct because it's a passageway. All of your tears are going to your nose and ultimately down your throat. That's where they're all headed. Okay? You don't really notice it most of the time because you're producing tears at such a kind of a slow rate that it really doesn't make that much of a difference. You know, you don't really notice it. But there are times that you do notice it. Like if you're crying because you're sad or super happy, or crying because you have bad allergies. Well, then two things happen. You're producing more tears than can be collected by this. And so they run down your face right here mostly, where they all naturally collect. But they also run out of your nose, which is why your nose runs when you cry. And I'll tell you a story about that here in a little bit. That's what I'm talking about. All right. So the tears will run out here. Now, most of the time, like I said, you don't notice it because what's on the inside of your nasal passages, and this may be disturbing, if you could look at it on a microscopic level, all of your respiratory passages are lined with something that looks like shag carpet. Like really long fibers called cilia. And it's not just that there's carpet in there, but the carpet is constantly doing this. Just like the cilia lining the ventricles of the brain is able to move the cerebrospinal fluid, you have these cilia lining your nasal passage that directs all these tears toward the back of your throat and then into your stomach. These also direct the mucus that's in your nasal passages and stuff toward the back of your throat and to your stomach. Now, when you're sick and you're producing, you're fighting something and you're producing more and having to get rid of more, that's why a lot of times your throat gets irritated, is because of all of the extra drainage that's going down your throat from fighting some kind of infection or virus, bacteria or virus that's having to go. But like every part, like your nasal passages, the airways in your lungs are all lined with this shag carpet. Now in your lungs, they're not pushing down, those are moving up. Okay? They're pushing that up. Again, headed toward your esophagus to dump that into your stomach. Your stomach is all, of course, where your food goes, but it's where a lot of this drainage and waste also goes because it's a convenient place to get rid of it, maybe even get a nutrient or two out of it. Now, if you've got a little room somewhere over here, I want you to write, mucus is my friend, not my enemy. I really don't like those commercials where they get Mucinex and they show Mucus as this little like he's basically like a booger, and he's like wearing a dirty t-shirt and he's like, I'm Mucus and I'm moving in. I want you in your mind to think, thank God. Welcome, my friend. Because if you didn't have mucus, you'd be dead like 8 ways before you hit the ground. Mucus lines your eyes, it lines your nasal passages, it lines your respiratory passages, and it lines your entire digestive tract. Without mucus, you could not survive. Now, I will concur that there are times when Mucinex is helpful, because mucus, as helpful as it is, sometimes gets a little too thick. And when it gets too thick, that the shag carpet can't even really move it effectively. So that's where it gets stuck and it gets congested. That's where drugs like Mucinex, and Mucinex isn't anything over the top fancy. It's the active ingredient's been one that's been around for more than 50 years. It's called guaifenesin. Guaifenesin is an expectorant. Its only job is to liquefy the mucus so that it flows a little more easy and the shag carpet can get it moving again. I also don't like that they made mucus green in that commercial. Mucus is not green. Mucus is clear. Okay? You know what's green? Pus. Pus is green. And sometimes pus gets into your mucus. Pus can be either white or yellow or green and all different variations thereof. And pus does indeed make mucus a little too thick. I know that's a lot of disgusting words at one time. But you can't even be mad at pus. You can't. Because what pus is white blood cells that fought and died to defend your body against foreign invaders. So, like, even that you can't really be upset with. But mucus is my friend, not my enemy. I feel like we need to be t-shirts that are made. Probably nobody would wear them just because most people don't want to wear a shirt that has mucus on it. Okay, tears. Tears lubricate and protect the eye. Tears lubricate and protect the eye. There are only two potential tear problems. Like, no, it's more complicated than that. Yeah, sure, it's a lot more complicated, but it really comes down to one of two things with tears. Quality. Okay? Basically, what is in the tears. Sometimes it's deficient in certain things, and as such, it's not doing a good job. The interesting thing about your tears, though, is what is in the tears changes depending on why you're crying. If you're crying because you're sad, the content of your tears is different than if you're crying because you're cutting onions or you're crying because of allergies. Like, there was somebody who actually did a really cool, like, I hesitate to call it art, but I think it is. They did somewhat of an exhibit by putting different tears caused by different things under the microscope, and as they crystallized and looking at the patterns of what they did, and it's actually quite beautiful. So if quality is one of the problems, what do you think the other problem is? What was it? Quantity, precisely. Some people are just not producing enough of the tears for some reason. Quantity. Are we making the right amount? Well, you don't want to just put water in your eyes, okay? Because if you did, sometimes just putting straight water in your eyes, it stings. The reason is because that's not what your body fluids are made of. They're not pure water, okay? Like contact solution or eye drops, they typically don't sting when you put them in your eyes because it's not just water. They have a certain amount of saline in them. They have a certain amount of salt that has to match the salt that's in the body. Just like if someone goes and they're dehydrated, they go to the ER and they give them an IV. Well, the IV is not going to be pure water, okay, because that wouldn't match what's in the bloodstream. It's going to be saline. It's going to have a small amount or percentage of saline solution or salt solution in there, so it matches what's in there. I remember one time I was my wife needed contact solution, and we were at the ballpark, and we like at Busch Stadium, we had no way to get some, and I was trying to figure out a way to mix like the salt that you can get from like the hot dog stand with a bottle of water and trying to get the ratios correct so that she'd have something to put. Fortunately, we were able to find somebody that had contact solution before I did something idiotic. But yeah, because that's not what's in contact solution is also like enzymes and cleaners and things like that too. But pure water won't really do the trick. Okay. Now, your tear layers are a little more complicated than this. And now this is going to be exaggerated. So tear layers on the eye. Okay, now I know it's one of those do as I say, not as I do things, because I very specifically touched my conjunctiva the other day just to wiggle it around so I could show you what a conjunctiva looked like. Okay, generally speaking, don't touch your eyes, don't rub your eyes, because when you rub your eyes, it takes a little bit for the layers to get put back to normal. So here's the surface of your eye, right here, surface of the eye. Okay, the first layer right here is a mucus layer. Your conjunctiva is considered a mucous membrane, just like the lining of your nasal passages or your respiratory passages or your intestines is a mucous membrane. So that protects that layer. It's got a thick, it's got water in it, but it has lots of glycoprotein. Glycoprotein basically is like is slick and makes a gel that protects the surface of your eye. So like if you rub your eye, you're wiping off that mucus layer, and it takes just a little bit for it to come back when you do. So there's the mucus layer, the next layer, and these are exaggerated in their thickness here, so I want you to understand that. This is the watery layer, sometimes called the aqueous layer, but I want to, so this is water and salt, and hundreds of other things, but that's the main deal that's in there. Water and salt that matches that's primarily what your tears are producing, is the watery layer. Mucus layer is being made by the conjunctiva, as there are special cells in there called goblet cells that make mucus. And then the outermost layer right here is the oil layer. Okay, this is important to have too. Okay, your oils are produced by the cells on the inside of your eyelid. You're like, well, why is that important? Because water wants to evaporate, and it wants to do so quickly. If you have like just a small amount of water sitting on your desk, it'll evaporate and it won't take long. As thin as this layer is too, it's going to evaporate really quickly. But your eyelid produces a layer of oil that covers that tear layer, and it prevents it from being able to be evaporated. Well, that's why if you rub your eyes or your eyes are itchy, like they just keep watering and keep watering and keep watering until that oil layer and that mucus layer get built back up. This right here is not enough by itself to cover and protect the eyes. So all three layers are really important. And people have tear trouble for lots of reasons. Sometimes they don't produce enough for the watery layer. Sometimes something's wrong with the mucus layer. Sometimes they're not producing enough oil to cover those tears. Also, if you wear contacts, you blink twice as much or more than someone who does not, because that's kind of introduced into this place. So your eyes are having to try to create this more or less over the surface of your contact lens, which is not impossible, but that's also why contact lenses don't last forever. They have to be porous to be able to let oxygen get through, because your corneas get their oxygen straight from the atmosphere. There's no blood vessels that go into the cornea, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see through them. But what happens is that mucus, the oil, and the proteins build up in your contact lenses. That's why you put them in that case at night, as it tries to basically break that down to get cleaned out. But if it's porous, those proteins are going to get all the way into those pores and not come out. So eventually you have to change those contacts out as a result. So that's the lowdown on tears. Any questions?